Reconnecting Relationships. Today we come to you live from the banks of the Mississippi River. Joining us is a very special colleague and friend to both David and I, Wendy Lemke. Wendy is the owner and founder of Lemke Counseling and Consulting. She is a licensed psychologist in Minnesota, but frankly, Wendy belongs to the world. If you're not seeing Wendy in Minnesota or online, you might find her teaching a course in Belize or traveling somewhere in Europe. We want to give you a couple of important factoids about Wendy, and I also want to just kind of help people kind of orient yourself to what this show is going to be about. So Wendy is a master hypnotherapist. She is a fellow and an approved consultant with the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis. She's been teaching with Ash. We both know Wendy through this process for decades. She's also very, very involved in ISSTD, which I always get the abbreviation wrong here, but it's the International Society for the Study of Traumatic Dissociation. Do I have that right?
For trauma and dissociation. Yes.
Trauma and dissociation. Okay. And very important to Wendy's identity. She is a very, very active teacher, faculty, and member of Ego State Therapy International Association. And she's the founder of the Ego State Therapy North American branch. One thing before we turn it over and welcome Wendy that I just kind of want to orient our viewers and listeners. We obviously have subscribers that are not therapists, that, you know, either may have practiced, been in therapy, or just have an interest in therapy. There's really going to be something for everyone here. You don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to have familiarity with hypnosis. You don't even have to know what ego state therapy is. What we're really aiming for is not only to tell you, but to show you what this looks and feels like and how it applies to your life. And we can't think of a better guest to have on the show to do that than Wendy. Welcome to the show, Wendy.
Well, thank you, Eric. That was quite an introduction. So it's a pleasure to be here. Dave and I go way, way, way back with the Minnesota Society of Clinical Hypnosis, and Eric and I now everything's way, way, way back because, you know, we've been doing this for a while. So, and I just want to mention, so, you know, I founded the kind of Ego State Therapy North America community, but I have to give a hats off to Maggie Phillips, who I know both of you do, because she was instrumental in, I look at it as we co-founded Ego State Therapy North America. She passed away before we could, I got the website up and rolling, but we were both working on the curriculum and getting a certification program in ego state therapy when she passed. So
maybe you could tell us a little bit about Maggie. Some of our listeners may know Maggie's work very well. Others may not be familiar with Maggie.
You know, and I can probably start by, you know, when we say ego state therapy, there's actually kind of, we're not so hung up on the term ego state. You know, I like to call it ego state therapy because it's a legacy to the Watkins, John and Helen, who are the co-founders of ego state therapy. And, you know, ego state therapy has its roots in psychoanalytic theory. It was based on the theories of Paul Federn, who was a close associate of Sigmund Freud. So there's a lineage of history. And I always say we're 6 degrees from Freud because it was like, you know, Freud and then the Watkins, or Federn and then the Watkins, and then came Claire and Maggie Phillips. I know they were well, back then everyone was kind of talking about these theories at the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, and Maggie Phillips and Claire Frederick actually published Healing the Divided Self in, I believe, in 1995. And that's based on ego state theory and the SARI model, which is a trauma treatment phase-oriented model that still we utilize and teach worldwide today. The Watkins came out with their book, Ego State Theory and Therapy, in 1997, I believe. So it was a few years of Healing the Divided Self. But, you know, when I had the privilege of hearing the Watkins, David, I think they came early 90s to the Minnesota Society of Clinical Hypnosis. And I was so impressed. I knew hypnosis, and I was working with my first, I thought, DID client, probably now more what we call OSDD and otherwise specified dissociative disorder. for those of you listening who don't know what DID is, it's the abbreviation for dissociative identity disorder, and formerly known as multiple personality disorder. And a lot of the theories and applications we utilize originated from working with that population. And, I know they were our complex clients, and we were figuring out, and I remember working with this person who had parts, and I thought she had multiple personalities, but she didn't have the amnesia that goes
with
and
it.
yeah, and it was so effective. It just intrigued me. And then I showed up at the Minnesota Society, and the Watkins were there, and I'm like, oh, there's already a theoretical model, and they've got all these applications, and so we've really just built on what was set up from years ago. And now, there's lots of parts. It's becoming, more and more popular because we started talking about it outside. The field of clinical hypnosis is vast, but we were only reaching people who would take hypnosis training. And now, Richard Schwartz and IFS, he really was great at marketing and kind of popularized parts work again. And now folks are learning there's some limits to IFS, that ego state kind of theory and therapy maybe takes over. I have a person I taught, Cynthia Good, who said this is more like principles than protocols. And so it weaves in because it's really individualized, and the same template can be used, the theories that and principles that we learn can expand not just for trauma, but for, performance enhancement, for grief, for depression, for OCD, for lots of clinical issues. I specialize in trauma and dissociative disorders, but we utilize ego state theory and therapy,
So maybe I can pick up on that, both with something you said, but also something that Eric referred to when he was introducing you. And that is, he was saying, look, you don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be trained in hypnosis. We will be talking about things that are relevant to everybody. And then Wendy, you talked about the 6 degrees of separation going back to Freud, where there is the grounding of what you're talking with us about in clinical world. But thinking about some of our very, very early conversations, they go back centuries in terms of experience. If I think about what we see on the cave paintings from 50,000 years ago, those are paintings displaying the sense that people have relationships with different parts, different things that are in them, different things that are in their environment, and how that changes who they are. So the sense that what we're going to be talking about, using the language of parts or parts of the self, whatever in the world the self is, we're talking about something that is universal to human experience. We're never just one thing.
Right.
And I'm hoping today you can really help us convey to our audience, how do we grab hold of that sense that we're made up of so many different dimensions in ways that help us move forward? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I like the way you're thinking about it, because when I explain to the lay population, that we really, and sometimes the lay population gets it way more than we think, right? Like if you explain dissociative identity disorder to someone, they'll be like, well, we all have multiple personalities. I'm like, yeah, we all have multiple states of self, right? There's a difference between how someone who has complex trauma, and the difference is the type of states of self they develop, and the states, the boundaries between those states, because they can have really rigid walls, so much so that they don't remember when they go from one state to self to the other. But we all can have, if you go back to Psych 101, everybody's familiar with the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, and much more of our behavior and emotions, thoughts, are influenced by the unconscious. And I kind of talk about the unconscious mind or unconscious parts of self, right? Because our unconscious mind can be divided into different states, different neural networks that are more or less connected with each other. And so sometimes even just the neurology of state dependent learning, how things that get wired together get fired together. Is that the old adage you're saying? Yeah. So it's really learning to just work with the different states of self. And I think it was Elizabeth Howell that wrote a book on the dissociative mind. And she talks about how, we use the language like, besides ourself, or I'm falling apart or coming unglued. Like, so there's just kind of, even in the language, if you watch interviews of celebrities or things on talk shows, or people are talking about my critical voice or the inner voice,
or even one part of me thinks, and then the other part of me.
Yeah.
That's such a day-to-day language.
Part of me wants to do this and part of me wants to do that. And
where someone says, I'm torn.
Yeah, I'm torn.
I'm torn. Yeah. So ego state therapy is an excellent tool for working with internal conflicts. When one part wants to do something, because we can give voice to those parts of self. We can, and in trance or combined with hypnosis, which I think is the best way to do clinical hypnosis or ego state therapy, we can access different states of self, parts. People can have the experience of things that they might not be consciously aware of. Not just that, we can explore parts of self related to symptoms, but we can also explore parts of self related to solutions for those symptoms. So I always tell people you don't have to be a therapeutic genius to be a good therapist. You have to be able to attune to your client and being really present with your client. And, I think everybody who's taken clinical hypnosis training is quite gifted in that, because it's based on attunement and utilization. Milton Erickson, we utilize what our clients bring, and they have the resources within them, so we look at sorry, there goes. Are you guys hearing the noise out there?
No, yeah. We heard a little rumble in the background in between the birds chirping.
It was a little lawnmower going by, I think. So it's really beneficial for accessing and coming up with solutions, mediating internal conflicts. I wouldn't know how to work with trauma and dissociation without it, because we utilize language and suggestions that speak to the whole self, not just what's presenting in front of you with conscious effort.
There's something you said I'd like to just capture, Eric. You often do this so well. I really like that you made it clear, and so I'm just highlighting it. The idea of dissociation or parts is not the problem, because we all have that. We all do that on a day-to-day basis. It's a question of whether the way in which those different parts talk to each other, work together, or that becomes the question of whether or not it's something that a person comes to us with for us to help them, because it's not functionally adaptive, right?
Right.
And I started thinking, as you were talking, about the world of psychedelics, which is becoming more popular. From a neurobiological perspective, there are these different neural networks that actually operate separately, but there is something in the way the brain works that binds them together, so that we have the subjective experience that it's me doing this, it's all of me here. But those are dissociable. They can be separate. And what psychedelics seem to do is cut the binding so that we can reorganize those pieces and parts in new ways to help them transcend what was otherwise limiting them. Yeah. So there's a natural relationship between what you do, I think, and what we're seeing that sometimes psychedelics are able to do. Is that something that you're in any way linked to or connected with?
I keep adjusting here because I know the light is changing, so I don't know if you guys need me to move, let me know. So I'm very cautious with that. I'm not trained in that line or field. I'll go back to the P principles, that if I'm working with, and keep in mind, I work with the most conflicted systems of self that you can see. And that's people with complex trauma, that because quite literally they feel like they're at war with themselves. This is why I feel like ego state therapists would be great at healing the country. That's why because we work on mediating that division, right? And instead of looking at what's wrong with this side or that side within the self, we look at, why does this side have this perception? Why does that perception is influenced by experiences and and values and things that people were taught, and different parts hold different perceptions. So nowhere do we see that more than the people that fall to the right of the differentiation dissociation continuum, because they are at more conflict with parts. They can have parts that are the opposite sex. They can have parts that are, one wants to go to church, one won't step foot in a church. They have parts that are divided. Look at Maggie Phillips and Claire Frederick's book, Healing the Divided Self. We could take the same template, Healing the Divided Country.
Can I ask just a quick question that our audience might not have understood there? When you say fall to the right of the differentiation,
Yes.
what does that mean? Can you just spell that out?
Very good question. So the Watkins, and I expanded this years ago, this kind of continuum of how we organize our internal world. And sometimes that it's not in a conscious, effortful way, right? It just happens. There are sometimes ego states of self or ego states that develop with conscious effort. We go to school, we take an internship, we read, we study, we spend a lot of time in one area, end up with a neural network of information that is all associated with that professional state, or maybe an athletic state. These are the states of self that the Watkins would talk about that develop from normal differentiation. Okay. So they are kind of on the left side of that continuum. And those that lean towards the right are states of self that maybe because of complex trauma, childhood trauma, severe neglect, abuse, is especially, bullying, or, really extreme types of things that unfortunately people go through in this world as children. Before the age of 10, they can develop these really rigid boundaries, and they fall to the right where their states of self are not connected, so they might have skills on one state, but they don't have access to those states if they switch, and their automatic defense is dissociating into another part of self. So they don't really learn to self-soothe, or, and quite often these folks go through lots of programs, they're learning skills, they're doing the work, but the work doesn't get connected. And that's where the ego state therapy has applications and specific strategies when at the right time it's safe and manageable to connect one state of the self with the other. I like connect better than integrate, because in the ego state model, we believe in the multiplicity of self, but we need everybody in the car. We can't leave somewhere really disconnected, right? So that's what I mean when I say the continuum. We all fall somewhere along that continuum of multiplicity. And what makes us different is kind of the space between, the boundaries of how we organize, and the types of states of self. I was at a lot of trauma in later years, as you guys both know, but I was fairly blessed as a child. I had great parents and a wonderful upbringing. So I don't really have traumatized child states, like some of our folks that do, and if they're really walled off, they can get thrown into that state of self and feel like they are there. They feel like they think they're 5. They just not just feel like they're 5, right?
Yes.
So it can be really complicated. And then on the far left, we can have folks that, and this was the content of, I did a really popular, I got very concerned with, we're concerned about the division in our country, but I started to see, Dave and I hail from Minnesota, so we went through some things recently, but I started to see the division in the therapist world. And I was just I just got so worried about the state of our country, if even the therapists are divided, and if they're having challenges of working with clients that have different views of their own. And, I'm quite skilled at that because I've been working in this world. So, I put together that free training for therapists, and I'm terrible at marketing. I'm blessed that people like you guys do podcasts and I get invited, so people end up knowing who I am. But I had like almost 400 people sign up for that free course. It was free, but I'm doing a more in-depth webinar for people because they really responded to looking at how people were giving. If we look at states of self as energy and how we relate to people, if my traumatized state is taking too much of my space, I'm scared of everyone, right? I can't. I'm coming from only that view from my trauma, because the perception changes depending on what state you're in. So if instead of political values or beliefs, people have developed a political identity, a political ego state, so to speak, and that energy is taking up your whole self, then you are coming at the world and your relationships with only that viewpoint of that political state. And this is what I saw happening with people that were giving up lifetime friendships of their best friends since, fourth grade, because they think differently, And so I started putting it in an ego state framework and saying, how can we get more balance of those states of self? Because this is a long way to get back to your question about that continuum. There are people who operate out of the added left, or what I call far left. I'm not talking politically here. I would have used a different term back in the day when I expanded this continuum. I was seeing people who are operating out of one state of self, and that's not really all that healthy either. Like a workaholic who's not in touch with their playful side, or someone who is eating, living, breathing politics, going to every single thing and not allowing room for something else. And I know that's a hot topic, and it involves so much, but we need to have balance within ourselves and our internal world before we can ever have balance out here.
What does it mean to be far left or far right from a dissociation perspective? I didn't totally understand that. Can you just explain that?
It's a polarized opposite ends, right? So on the far right of the continuum, and this is like in Watkins' book, Ego State Theory and Therapy, they have the little circles, and I should have had a little diagram I could have pulled up here because it's easier to explain with the diagram. So on the right, it's like you have different states of self. Say you're professional, your parent, your athlete, your whatever, the things that make up aspects of what make you up, who you are. And we have different boundaries between those states of self. When I'm in my professional, before we started here, we're friends, so we were talking personal stories. It's a little, I see you, Eric, and I get in touch with my playful self, because you have a lot of playful energy. But we shift our space, our internal space. And now I'm more in my professional state of self, and we're talking professional ideas, and I'm activated that neural network of memory. So people on our boundaries, I can move in and out of those states quite easily. We can shift quite easily. People with a lot of trauma, they have a hard time. Sometimes they get thrown into another state and, have amnesia. So they're on the right. On the left, if we have somebody who operates out of only one state, they have other states of self that are kind of dormant, or they've walled off. They're not necessarily, DID, but maybe a workaholic who takes no time for play, or someone who only focuses on their parental identity, or someone whose political identity has consumed them. It could be any kind of one part of self takes too much of the space, right? And all the parts are important. Certainly those parts are important, but we have to have balance, and we move in and out. And I have a technique that I call playing with the space. Is the space set up the way it needs to be? For some folks, we're needing to build walls. For others, we're needing to have them come down. Sometimes we need to expand the space. Sometimes we have to work on, because for those on the complex trauma or dissociation, or what we call that right of that continuum, it might not be safe and manageable for parts to exist in the same space. We have a lot of work to do before we can unravel things like that. So back to your question, Dave, with psychedelics, I have some of the P principles is the whole self on board with that line of treatment. If there's one part of the self that doesn't want to change or is resistant, we have to deal with that resistance before we do any kind of treatment. One of the P principles of ego state therapy is purpose. What is the purpose of a symptom? If we try to get rid of a symptom, we get a lot of defense, right? We don't, and some parts of self will think you're trying to get rid of that part of the self. And so this is why we see a lot of not just internal conflicts, but conflicts, external conflicts as well. If there's any polarized relationships in and too much of the energy is, child energy, and a partner who is a relationship where they're going to start arguing, right? And if they access a childlike state in each, then you have two 10-year-olds fighting, and we know that doesn't work,
Right.
And it's not conscious necessarily. You just, we get triggered, and defenses just come up. So it's really trying to figure out how to be in the right state of self for the right time and context, how to have internal balance for those on the right, how to connect with states of self so they have continuity of memory, experience, even a sense of being connected to the body.
Well, there's a way in which, as you're talking, I'm aware that in my mind, my ping pong popcorn brain where things are bouncing around, that there is a way in which I'm hearing polar language that is either really healthy and adaptive or not. So, for example, when you talk about the left end of the continuum, where identity is more flexible, I hear the word flexible. Most of us would say that's a good thing.
Okay,
but
so
if flexibility exists to such an extreme that there's no rigidity, it's called collapse. I mean,
are we back?
You can't hold up. Or at the other end, when we talk about strength, most people say, well, that's a good idea. But if it is rigid, all of a sudden it carries a different quality. So it's how those pieces and parts of the self, the more flexible, the more rigid, the stronger, the collapsed, the whatever, they're all there and they all have a place. But it's how do they interact in a way that's adaptive for that unity we call the self. Is that a fair way of capturing it?
You bring up a really important point and articulated it much better than I was. I want to reiterate, polarized views are not the problem, right? We want strong opinions and views. We want people to have that, but it is how you navigate that with your other states of self, that you have balance, and that you are and how you navigate that with the external world too, right? So, we want to have a neutrality, not in our values and beliefs, but because I remember bringing up, I remember I grew up in the 80s, right? Like professionally, and late 80s, early 90s. We don't want to age myself too much, but this was in the height of the memory wars, and I was taught therapeutic neutrality, really kind of what you share and what you don't, and to not be suggestive in any way. Even with parts work, we'll be like, when we access states of self, or can you get in touch with parts? Let me know what you're experiencing, if anything at all. We want anything to be okay. So we were really taught a lot about how we can suggest, and the power of suggestion is real. And now people are getting suggestions everywhere. I call it the TikTok trance, but it's really social media, and people get so absorbed. We know hypnotic phenomena exists when they're in that trance, and in that state of trance, you are more suggestible. Critical thinking goes out the window. You don't think about where this is coming from. Is this really a good gadget I should purchase? Is this, people are just impulsively taking it in without the critical thinking that we want with that kind of information.
And just as another example of that, I mean, and this comes from my own use of AI, but I would extend that to AI, because, you start asking it a question. It gives you back a suggestion that isn't a permissive suggestion. It's a definitive answer. There's not a process where most people are saying, oh, well, what sources did it draw upon? How did it come to that conclusion? Then you get an answer. Ooh, I want to respond to this. So you ask it another thing, and then it tells you another answer, and you kind of go down the rabbit hole. So that's immediately what I think of when I hear you talk about.
Yeah. And I know you guys were taught this as well as I was, and I'm often giving my clients the suggestion that please disregard anything that is not useful, and I add your whole self, and take in what makes sense for your whole self. Because I'm always working with multiplicity, and our clients are not consciously aware. I'll give an example of clients, and this is the P principles at work, like pacing, permission. We get permission. What's the purpose of a symptom? We prime our language for safety. And I get somebody with trauma. I want EMDR. I'm ready to do this. I'm raring to go. And and the conscious self, the presenting self, however you want to label it, is ready. But as we start talking, they're not aware that the unconscious mind has a need to go a little slower. And so I'm always I would rather err on the side of caution and safety, whether for anything. I'm like, one of the things I would be doing working with my clients would be, I'm wondering, I really care about what happened to you, and I understand you really want to, get right in there, but I want to make sure you have the ability and the skills to navigate and manage what comes up for you. So I'm wondering if we could explore the unconscious mind or any parts of self to see if there's any wisdom about, proceeding at a different pace. Sometimes I might just say, as we talk about this, what are you experiencing in your body? Oh, there's some anxiety coming up in my stomach. Well, I want to respect the wisdom of that. That's ego state. I want to respect the wisdom of what that anxiety is trying to tell us. Is it a manageable level of anxiety? I want to proceed, because if I go forward and listen to, wholeheartedly the pace that people are ready to dive into, then they come back the next week and they've spiraled down. They're not feeling safe. So a lot of the initial work is like, are they prepared? Is the whole self on board? Even the language of going into trance. I think I learned some of this language from Dan Brown years ago. Would he come to Minnesota maybe like 3 times, Dave? He was so brilliant. But it was like, maybe a part of you can hang on to whatever vigilance you need, while another part of you experiences the relaxation in your hand. Or, a part of you can stay as vigilant as you need while we explore the such and such. So most of my language, even with hypnotic suggestions, speaks to all sides of self that I may or may not know who's listening, right? Because there's...
So, picking up on that, Eric and I had talked before we began the recording of each of us role-playing a facsimile of a client, right? To protect the client's privacy and confidentiality. But to role play a character to demonstrate a little bit what it would sound like.
Sure.
So I think that would really be helpful. Again, for our audience, one of the things that I'm struck by as I'm listening with a part of my mind, while other parts of my mind are engaged with you.
And a part of my mind is listening to the helicopter. That's going on. Yeah.
There's a quality of welcoming non-judgmentalness.
Yes, absolutely.
That makes it, I think, extremely safe for people who are fractured, traumatized, fragmented. So much of your language, and maybe we'll hear it in our role plays, is both inviting and welcoming. You belong here, and also non-judging. Right?
Yes.
But if you're going to show up, you got to wear a tie. It's not that kind of messaging.
And
there's
Dave,
a non-judgmentalness. Yeah.
I would add to that, it's accepting and very non-judging of the whole self, of parts that we might really have a hard time understanding their behavior, but it's Carl Rogers, right? Unconditional positive guard for the whole self and all the parts within that self.
Okay. Eric, do you want to pick up on that and move in? Would you like me to start? What's your preference?
Well, first thing, it's just, I think it really speaks to how in sync you and I are, David. I mean, the three of us are so in sync, and I hope that's going to come across, but just in kind of hosting this together, that the moment, Wendy, that you started to kind of go into this like therapist self, as blah, 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 well, then this, I started thinking, ooh, we got to do the role play now. And Boom, there you go, David. So I'm all on board with that. This seems like the perfect time, and I know we were talking earlier about how we both want to take a try at this. Why don't you go first,
Okay.
and then I'll follow. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a first-time parent, and I never had sleep problem before. And in the early months after my child was born, my wife was doing the lion's share of the work, and I peacefully and deeply, I had no problem. But then about 5, 6 months after my son was born, I began to notice a problem, and the problem hasn't gone away despite my using a bunch of different meds. They leave me feeling tired the next day or wired the next day. So that doesn't feel good. It's bad enough if I'm not getting good sleep. Now, on top of that, I'm feeling my next day is even more ruined.
Yeah.
But boy, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, bloop, my eyes open. And it's not like I'm thinking about anything in particular. It's just like someone turned on a light switch.
Yeah.
And I'm just awake.
Yeah.
And then I start to get scared. If I can't go back to sleep, what's going to happen? And if the next night and the next night and the next week and the next month, the life that I knew is over, I'm going to be a lousy dad. I'm not going to be there for my wife. I'm really getting nervous. I can't seem to get enough rest. So I heard about you and I thought maybe you can do something to get me to go to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, a lot of ideas are coming to my mind as you talk about this, and I think in fact I don't have it available on my website, but I've done a couple times taught a sleep webinar based on self-state, ego state strategies, right? And yeah, so I think, I want to share, I know we've been talking about this, but, we all have different states of self, and it sounds like your parental state, this started with your parental state, the development of your parental state. And it can be challenging to kind of shift out of that, because once we're parent, we're always a parent. Right. And so I sometimes,
and I want to be a good parent.
Of course you do. Yeah, of course you do. So, and a good parent requires some good sleep, right? So first of all, I'd like to explore if there are any maybe unconscious states of self getting in the way, like your parental state. That's an assumption. I don't know if that's getting in the way of allowing your body to have the rest that it really knows how to do, but just has got sidetracked a little bit. So I'm wondering if you'd be open to just kind of shifting into a space to explore if it would be okay for you to start sleeping better.
Oh, I'd love to sleep better. Yeah, it's okay with me.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if there's any, my thought is we need to make sure there aren't any unconscious barriers to getting in the way of that.
How would I know if it's unconscious?
Well, you would know, because we'll just see what comes up. Sometimes we're surprised at what comes up. There might even be some solutions to how to sleep better from your own unconscious wisdom, because we certainly aren't aware of everything at all times.
Well, that would be kind of cool, because the doctors I'm seeing don't have any ideas.
Right. Well, and as you know, there are not good medications out there for sleep. They can be habit forming. Even if they're non-addictive, they certainly still are habit forming. They have a lot of side effects. And so we really want to teach people to learn how to be in the best state of sleep.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, we can shift into this. I'd also like you, I know we just have a little bit of time now, but a couple different things that come to mind, like, where do you sleep the best? What position do you need to sleep in? What state of self do you sleep the best in? We could even do a, hypnotic. I know you know a little bit about hypnosis. We can go back to a time where you slept really good to see if we can't access that state and see if some of that part of you that used to, because you used to sleep good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until the little fellow came along.
Yeah. A little delight. So should we move into a strategy now, or
Well, let me step out of role.
Okay,
that's a different part of self.
Yeah.
Eric, time-wise, do you want me to proceed with this? Wendy and I to draw this to a close and transition into what you two will do. What are your thoughts?
I definitely think you should continue. There'll
Okay.
hopefully be time and space for me to go. One thing I do think that's important as you're acting this out is that question that you just posed, Wendy. I think that's a question on the mind of so many trainees and young therapists, right? When is the moment that you transition into the, hey, do you want to do this thing?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? How do you broach that? Does that happen in a formal way, right? Where you introduce
Yeah.
hypnosis? Does it happen naturalistically? So I think you all should continue, but it might be helpful to just speak to that.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I was kind of trying to do that because psychoeducation is so important, and we need to explain to our clients why we're utilizing what we're utilizing, and we need to explain if we're going to use formal hypnosis. And hypnosis is a very powerful tool. You shouldn't be eliciting trance in a formal way unless you know what you're doing, right? You need to really also know when people take hypnosis training, they realize they've been utilizing hypnotic techniques. Like we all know the art of being hypnotic. And I move in and out of my hypnotic pattern, quite with ease in therapy. But it's important to know that our suggestions we give when people are in a trance-like state are really important. When we work with trauma, we're sometimes really orientating people out of their own trance states that are not pleasant, right? We want to teach people to have an exit and so, Dave is role playing here and we're not doing therapy in this podcast, right? And I know Dave knows how to kind of formally settle into like a trance state, so I'm not going to do a formal elicitation. But if you were working with clients, you would want to have, we would talk about multiplicity within the self and because otherwise clients, you think I have DID? No, we all have multiple states of self, right? So the psychoeducation piece is important before you shift into applications, whether it's hypnotic work or any kind of work, right?
Let's segue back to the series of questions that you asked me, and I'll go into role. Your questions were, which state of sleep am I sleeping best in? What position? My memories of having slept well for many, many years.
Right.
So maybe pick up on that, and I'll just be here as this made-up client.
Right. And the other first part I would want to, if I were working with a client, I always start with a safe space. I want to know that they can get to a comfortable state in that I work with, whether it's a state of self or comfortable state in the body. And I'm assuming we've done that, right, Dave? You know how to get to that comfort state. And now, knowing you know how to do that, it's safe and manageable to explore your unconscious mind for whatever might come up. Because with sleep, a lot of things come up, especially with trauma. People with trauma, quite often, it's a part that doesn't feel safe to sleep. They're not going to let the body sleep, right? Because maybe bad things happened at night. So it'd be different than a parental state. Might be a trauma.
So you just said something that I had a reaction to.
Okay.
When you talked about trauma, I felt I don't have a history of trauma. But then it shifted, and I had that sense that I'm afraid I might experience trauma. Meaning, what if I'm not careful enough and something happens to my son? I would never forgive myself.
Yeah.
So, boy, that came up, and that was really strong. I guess I want so much to be a good dad.
Yeah.
And that would be the worst that could happen.
Yeah. And we don't know. I know Dave well, because I remember Dave, one of Dave's, I'm going out of role again. But if this is something you had shared with me, I would be like, boy, a wise man once told me that we, as a parent, we make zillions of decisions and we only really look at the ones that go wrong, right? We just take for granted all those decisions because we can't know what is right or what's going to happen in the future, right? We just do the best we can with where we want to go. But I understand, as you say, that you have this fear. And so there's a fear part coming up, right? A part that kind of is anxious and you're consciously aware of things that are coming up that might be getting in the way. So I'm wondering if it would be okay to just kind of explore, and we can do this. You can just kind of settle in and close your eyes if you'd like. Yeah. And I know you know how to naturally go into trance. And perhaps, you've already slowly opened the door to parts of self that relate to this struggle of sleep, or that we think might relate. And I'm wondering if you could just perhaps envision a space in your mind. And maybe you have a chair for each part, or however you'd like to envision that space in a way that feels safe and manageable to you. And those chairs can be as close together or as far apart as they need in order for that space to feel right and comforting. And perhaps there's a chair for that fearful part. Maybe there's a chair for the parent. Maybe that's one and the same, I'm not sure. And maybe there's a chair for that part of you that used to sleep so well. Yeah, and as you're nodding, I can see you're even getting in touch. I'm wondering if it'd be okay for you to tell me what you're experiencing.
What I'm experiencing, I guess I'll call a merger.
A merger.
The years that I slept well go all the way back to when I was a little boy.
Yeah.
The same way that my little boy is now a little boy who knows how to sleep just fine.
Yeah.
But I'm really comforted by that and aware of the dad who is overseeing that and worried that I will blink and miss something and something bad could happen.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of torn between being afraid about what might happen and the comfort of knowing my son is sort of also me as a little boy.
Yeah. And I wonder, and I can see, because the smile, it seems like it's a pleasant thought to think of the little boy you were, the little boy in you. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, sometimes youngsters have the most creative ideas. And I wonder if that little boy, as there's this kind of merger, has any wisdom or insight to offer that would be helpful in you sleeping now.
Yeah.
I don't know, Dave, but I sometimes know that little kids have different strategies that they learn to fall asleep with. And we learn how to fall asleep with routine and comfort. Sometimes we have a stuffed animal or a favorite toy. Maybe it's a blanket that we can remember the feeling and sense of. And I don't know if there's something that comes to mind and as you're nodding, and isn't it interesting that even the memory of that object or what comes to mind is pleasant and calming and soothing.
Well, what I'm finding, is it okay if I open my eye?
Yeah, certainly. You can do whatever you'd like. And as you open your...
funny mix where the solution seems to be to remember how to play.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because when I do this, I find for those of us that were blessed without a trauma history in childhood, right, that we usually we learn how to fall asleep as a kid, right? We just know, our bodies know how to sleep well. We just go. And then we get conditioned with little different things. And so sometimes the state of sleep we can sleep the best in is a childlike state. And so if you can access that state, that can be helpful. Sometimes I have clients that sometimes I sleep best in my camper. Go figure, I'm at the Mississippi, right? Got a really nice camper mattress. It's not a camper mattress, it's a really good one in there. But if I'm in a hotel, I can be in my camper mat. I can be in our minds can take us. I always use Albert Einstein. Logic will take you from A to B. Your imagination can take you anywhere. So we can get into a state of sleep, a place of sleep that we sleep the best, right? Now, if we had more time, Dave, and I see your reorientate and roll, we might explore, are there other states interfering? Are there other states with language? You guys know the importance of the language because we all do hypnosis, and we know the power of clinical hypnosis works because our clients are suggestible and we give helpful suggestions. But our clients go in and out of their own states of self. and they give themselves horrendous suggestions about sleep. I'm a terrible sleeper. I'm going to not sleep well. I'm going to miss something. You're winding up that state of self, that overcritical, whatever. If you activate that, you're not going to sleep well, right? So we want to correct, also want to get our that's another part of work is I look at the voices we develop, you know, and working with the critical and with the internal critic, and most of the voices we develop serve a purpose. The dad part that's scared wants to be the best dad. It serves a purpose. He wants to be vigilant and make sure he doesn't make any mistakes. And so how do we meet that purpose without paralyzing and creating a problem with another state of self?
So
I'm wondering if
share with the audience, if I can. Eric, is it okay? I'll just kind of bring my experience, my role play to a close. The experience that I had, which was really quite a felt sense, it was a rich experience, was that the responsible dad has overstepped with his responsibility. And out of that well-intentioned desire to be a good father, he was crushing the kid's need to play. So in a sense, what I heard in my mind's eye was both myself as a little child and my young son as the little child that he is saying, it's okay, I'm going to go play. And then all I had to do is just sort of sit back at the park on a bench while he's playing and having a delightful time, and I can just be sitting and relaxing. I don't have to be vigilantly protecting him in every moment. And so for our audience, that sense of different parts of me, myself as a boy, myself as a father, and bringing in my sense of my son as his own person integrated in me, when they work together, the responsible dad could step back, feel relaxed, because during sleep, there's a lot of imaginary playfulness that's happening, and I don't want to crush that, right? I want that to be allowed to go forward, so when I wake up in the morning, I can be full of ideas and dreams and memories and take that into my day more comfortably. So on that note, it was helpful beyond the role play. It actually was something I could very powerfully relate to. Very cool.
Yeah, and you don't know, we don't know what's going to come up, right?
Right.
I don't guide that. I don't project. I think it could be this or that, but I want to be open to what comes from my client, like what comes up for them. And then we navigate, and then we would wrap this up with suggestions like, isn't it interesting all that you pulled together? I wonder how that will continue to come together for you this week in ways that will enhance your sleep, right? We're giving suggestions and shifting language. And so there's a lot more to it than just these pieces, but that gives our viewers a good idea and context of what it's like to work with parts.
I wanted to just offer a few observations in this sort of third-party role here that I think will hopefully crystallize some things that you all were demonstrating. So first thing, I thought there was a moment where, throughout, you talked earlier that sort of the two pillars, and I completely agree with this. This really underpins all of my professional work. You talk about how the two pillars are attunement and utilization. So I thought that you really demonstrated that so nicely. In particular, I thought there was a couple of really pivotal moments. The first moment that stood out to me, Wendy, was when you noticed David nodding his head, and you utilized that, and you said, I see you nodding your head. I wonder, would it be all right if that part of you could give voice to what you're experiencing right now? I don't know if I'm saying it exactly the way you did. And what I loved about that was not only did you utilize what was happening in the room, but it's also such a smooth way of engaging in hypnotic communication. A lot of therapists who are learning hypnosis, they can be a little clunky, and they could think like, well, now it's signaling time, or now I have to ask this very specific question and I'm going to answer it in a different way. But that was just so smooth. You saw the head nod and you just kind of brought that in.
Yeah.
The other thing I loved was when you recognized that there was this multiplicity of states. You called it the youngster, and you invited the youngster in. And then, David, that's when, from that perspective of the youngster, you could share that pearl of wisdom that your older self could kind of hold on to about, playing and being immersed, and that's actually like the way the kids sleep. They sleep so well because they played and then they're zonked, and I thought that was really nice way of kind of inviting one part to share knowledge with the other part. The other thing that you did so naturally, which is I think kind of an Ericksonian technique, is you kind of gave like little examples to aid in the unconscious exploration. You said, well, sometimes kids are doing this in their room and sometimes they're doing that, and and then I don't know, maybe it's that or maybe it's something else that's coming to mind. And so it's like this seeding. And so for some of our clients, they're off to the races. They have a million things that come to their mind that they can utilize, and others need like a little assist. And so that was a really nice way of doing it.
Yeah. And I sometimes will give ideas, and then because I really believe what comes up with our clients and what they have is much better. But there are some that need a little prompt, like, I know this has been helpful, or perhaps this has been helpful, and perhaps your unconscious mind will provide something even better, more suited to you. So then the suggestion is, opens up. And the other thing I wanted to state that, with sleep, when we look at the P principles, one of the principles is physiology. The physiology changes depending on what state is dominant. So really important for physical issues when working with like somatic things. But with sleep, who doesn't sleep? If we activate the parental or the professional ego state, they are on, right? And the physiology shifts. So sometimes we need, I had a client very far along, pretty connected client with a dissociative identity disorder, where she needed to be in the girl parts to sleep. The professional could stay up for 4 days, but of course the body then would be exhausted, and then the parts would come out and she'd be hijacked and couldn't do anything. So we needed a balanced system. And so they kind of had an image of a curtain. The girls had to be close enough for the body to sleep, and the professional had to be as far away as needed so the body could sleep. So again, it's language that plays with the multiplicity. And it was a technique, and that client really, when she can't sleep, I call it playing with the space. The girls need to come closer and another part needs to back up, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you can close the door and trust that the alarm will wake up the parental self, the tears, crying baby will wake up the parental self. And if we can close the door, or whatever imagery is helpful to, shut out whatever states are interfering, but recognize and validate that they have a purpose for why they're interfering. It's usually
something that
it's usually about safety, of some sort.
What I'm struck by, going back to something that you said, Eric, the little pearls that Wendy was offering, the different suggestions. Eric, you and I have published books, right? We've written articles. Wendy, you've done other kinds of writing with your newsletters and all of the different things that you do.
I have a couple chapters now.
Yeah.
And
there you go.
they're published in German, so in 2 different books. But I'm working on some writing. It's a long process.
Well, I'm so glad to hear, going back to something you and I said 25 years ago. You have this and you have that too. Anyway, what I'm reminded of is what an editor, said to me when I was writing my first book, when I was panicking, saying, I don't have anything new to say. This has all been said before. Why am I even doing this, right? And she said to me, English has 26 letters, no more, no less. And never, ever have those 26 letters been put together in the particular specific way that you're going to put them together. That's what you need to do. And so what I'm thinking about that therapeutically is that there's a beautiful message that what you have within you is sufficient. You're not insufficient. You have what you need. Now, you may have put them together in this way, and that hasn't worked well for you. In this internal exploration, in this accessing the different parts of the self, we're just drawing on what's already there, reorganizing their relationship to one another, and we're going to produce something new that works best for you. So that really jumped out at me in our role play and in our conversation so far.
And can I add to that, Dave, for the folks who maybe have a lot of trauma and neglect and feel like, but I don't have the things I need, right? They have more than they're consciously aware of.
Yes.
And we can continue to develop internal resources and parts of self all throughout our career. I tell people, and if you would have told me, and Dave, you probably know and remember this about me, but I had really debilitating speech anxiety. And years ago, John Swada asked me to do something for Mish when he's like, you have a lot to offer. And I'm like, I can do that now. And it was not great. When I shifted into my clinician state and did a demonstration, it was fine. So if you would have told me, my younger self, that I would be getting paid to speak around the globe, my future self, I would have thought, I would have bet millions of dollars that would have never happened. I developed somehow along the way a speaker identity, a speaker ego state, right? And enjoy it and enjoy sharing my passion now. So we develop states of self and resources and all throughout. So even if you didn't get what you needed when you were young, we can always develop internal resources, an internal sense of caregiver, that we can morph. I would have loved everybody to have a blessed upbringing, but that's just not the way it goes. The key is we need to be able to connect with our parts of self and really feel connected, or we're never going to feel connected out here, even if you are,
Yeah, that's really well said.
And that's a good place to revisit something you said earlier that I noted, but internally challenged, Wendy. You said something to the effect of, well, you have your playful self, but now it's time to go into your professional self. And there was a way you said it that for me felt like, well, they can't really coexist together, but I think you've been showing this whole time that they are coexisting together. You can be in your professional self and be playful.
I like that.
Yeah.
Well, we know the power of the word "and," right?
Right. Right.
You can have this and that.
Right.
Right.
You get to have both. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, how are you doing for time, Wendy?
Well, I could talk to you guys all day. I'm fine.
We feel the same way.
Yeah.
I would like to include in our episode another role play. Do you have a sense, Eric, or obviously Wendy, do you have a sense of any particular dimension of a role play that might be especially useful for?
Oh, I've got a good one for you. I don't know if we have the time, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Yeah.
Okay.
And our viewers will know this is a role play, that there's so many more pieces and caveats that go into it. But we can give an example, and I talk about playing with the space. I have some ideas about how I could demonstrate that depending on what the context is. We have an ego state strategy, and that's why I teach it's more principles, because I teach a lot of applications, but the applications, you have to know your therapeutic intention, because we might not use a specific application with a different therapeutic intention. So let's just roll with it and see what comes to mind, and I'll bring in whatever I think will be useful.
Okay, and I think what I'm going to do for this is I could give you a whole background.
So give me the in lieu of time. Give me the most presenting. What is the most presenting concern or conflict or symptom?
I'm gonna be that. I'm gonna step into the client. I'm gonna be that.
Okay.
So I'm gonna kind of like, if you're watching on the screen, put my hand down and transition into a different state. But I'm still me. I'm still in there. But I'm gonna sound and feel different. Okay. All right. You can just call me Jane.
Jane. All right, Jane.
Okay. So Wendy, I I've really been bothered by something. I've just been thinking about it a lot since our last session. I really love our sessions together. I feel like, we're so close and you understand me. And I feel like I can get mad at you. I never can get mad at anybody and you'll still be there. And I have to admit, I actually hope that I get the opportunity to be mad at you because I never get the chance to repair things with people like I do with you. But I'm really upset about something. Can I tell you what it is?
Yeah, please do. Please
Okay.
do.
So I feel like I can't remember how we end in those moments, what it feels like to have everything be okay with you. Like when I'm upset, I just want to be able to remember because I feel like I can't be soothed.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't be soothed, and I hate that I have to be here with you all the time to make that happen. Can you help me?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's certainly understanding why I know we only have this one meeting a week or two meetings a week and all the other times, because when you feel like you can't be soothed, I'm wondering how old you feel.
I feel like a little girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, of course, no wonder how panicky that must feel when you're stuck in that little girl energy who can't connect to an adult, right?
Like mother, I just can't go to her. I see how
Right.
upset she is on the phone.
Right.
She's yelling at dad on the phone. I can't go to her. I have to make
No.
myself small.
Right. So I'm wondering if you can remind me, because this would be information I would already have. How old are you? Really? How old's
I'm
Jane?
53.
Jane is 53, right?
53. Yeah.
So Jane is 53 and she feels like a little girl who can't be soothed at times. Yeah. So as you settle back in, is Jane a parent?
Jane is a parent.
And Jane is feels like a relatively good parent. She feels okay about her parenting skills.
And just to be clear, I'm making up the age of 53, but
Yes.
Right.
Of course.
Great question. Yes, she does.
Okay.
Yes, she does.
Okay, good. Okay. So you can settle back into the
I'm
role.
going to be little girl Jane again.
Yep, little girl Jane, right? So, now that you're feeling in touch with that anxiety and that can't be self-soothed, I'm wondering, little Jane, if you have any stuffed animals or anything that's calming or comforting, or a blanket or a pet or
My terry cloth cotton blanket.
yeah.
It's got a great picture of Shira, the warrior on TV that I used to watch.
Yeah. Okay. And you really like Shira the warrior.
Yeah. She has this really flowing, long, blonde hair and the armor.
Yeah.
And I love that she had a sword because I didn't know any little girls that got swords.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I see. Do you notice as you focus on, is it Shira? Am I saying her name right? Shira?
Shira, yeah.
Shira. As you focus on Shira and that sword and that power that she has, you feel kind of strong or quiet. Are you noticing how you feel different?
Well, she would hold up her sword and the lightning would hit it and she would become all powerful. I don't feel like there's any, I don't know where the lightning is. I don't know what that is.
I think it would be okay for you to experience some of the comfort and the lightning,
Please,
the power
please.
from. Okay.
I would really like that.
So why don't you I'd like you to sit on, as you kind of settle into this space, and you can close your eyes and really kind of go there. Yeah. And I want you to just imagine you are sitting on a bench, and that bench can be as long as it needs to be in order for you to be on that bench comfortable. But Shira is with you, and I don't know how far away she's sitting, but as you sit on that bench, would it be okay to really feel some of the lightning and the strength that she has as she moves closer?
I think I feel scared. I think I want to see it happen to her first. But I
Okay.
do want to feel it, but I need to see it. I need to see it happen to her first because what if the lightning hurts me?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. So I'm wondering perhaps, I know little Jane, are you in touch with the Jane, the parental Jane? The parental Jane that has raised kids and has comforted and soothed and
I know her. I know who she is. I know she's
Mhm.
there, but I don't really feel,
You don't
I
feel
don't
her.
really feel that. She's just kind of like a person that's there.
Would it be okay to invite her to the bench as well? She can sit on the other side of Shira, or she can.
Well, that's okay, but would you come too?
I can come too. My voice is there with you.
Okay.
You know how my voice is. You know how I sound. Yeah, you know. And I bet the parental part of you knows how I sound as well, because I've talked and worked with her. And as I'm there with you, and she's there, and Shira's there, what are you noticing or experiencing now? Yeah,
It's nice to have a bench of, it's nice to have a full bench
it's nice to have a full bench.
because my bench always felt empty.
Yeah. So really kind of notice this bench. Notice the fullness and how that starts to feel. Notice the space where Shira is, where the parental Jane is. And I'm wondering if the parental Jane and Shira would always be here with you on that bench, or if they could be accessible whenever you'd like them to show up. And they know my voice, the things I would say, and you can have a sense of me there as well.
Can you give me a toy bench or something I could put in my pocket to take it
Yeah.
with me?
Well, you can create whatever toy bench you'd like. Tell me, if you were to create that toy bench, what would it look like?
Well, it couldn't be like a regular toy
Right.
because if it was a plastic bench, the plastic could break. And I can't handle that bench breaking right now. I need it to be unbreakable if I carry it with me everywhere.
Yep. And this is because your imagination is creating this bench, it can be unbreakable. You can envision it with the most sturdy, strong frame. It can be whatever color is the most calming to you. Whatever color is the most calming. And you can even imagine, if it's helpful, or maybe you even have a better idea of me holding and putting all the calming energy and soothing energy that I have to give to you into that bench. And Shira is giving you all the strength and courage you need to carry in that bench that can always be with you. And the parental mom, as moms do, take that in whatever way is peaceful and comforting. And even if you forget the bench is there, perhaps the parental part of you could remind you that bench is there, that comfort, that soothing bench, unbreakable, only yours to take with you whenever you need. You can carry it in your pocket. You can carry it in your mind. Yeah. And as you feel that rocking motion, just take it in even deeper. Yeah. Calm, comfortable movement just by imagining and having this bench with you. And you know how powerful your imagination is. So I know we're kind of wrapping up on time, but I want you to just hang on to that, and you can remind, even if you forget, you have other parts that can remind you. It's always there, and you can always come back to this bench when you need, inviting who you need. So just take whatever's helpful. I want to thank Shira and thank that parental part of you, and thank you for bringing yourself this comfort and how you're learning to build a comfort within that you can have.
Wendy,
Yes.
you said other parts. You said I
Yeah.
have other parts to remind me, and I know that there are other parts, but I don't really know all of them. Like
Yeah.
that feels scary. Like how can you help me make sure that the time is right for me to meet the parts that I don't know?
Yeah. Well, we're going to do that in a safe and manageable way. And I'm going to rely on your wisdom and Shira's wisdom and the parental part of you that can help you feel safe and manageable now, that we will meet whatever other parts that you need to in a time that feels safe and manageable to you. And if anything is too scary, you can always come back to this safe bench, this bench where you have Shira, you have your bench that you're carrying with you. You have that parental part of you. Okay?
Maybe what we could do is it could be like action figures, and I could just start with the toy bench with you and Shira and the mother self of me, and then if we meet somebody else in a future session, then maybe only after that I'll invite them on the bench. That way I'll know that they're
Yeah.
safe.
Yeah. And you know what? You can play with, they can get close to the bench. Maybe they'll be on a different bench, not right on your bench, but a bench you can see first. And that bench can be however far away it needs to be. Maybe you like look through it like through a kaleidoscope or binoculars or something. It's so far away. So we do it in a way that feels safe and manageable. And then it would just be on the bench for just a moment. And Eric, I don't know, but I've traveled to all kinds of places. I saw a bench that is the largest bench I think in the world. Like some that the bench goes on forever. I have a picture of it I can share with you later. But you could have some part on so far away from you on the bench that you wouldn't even be able to see them on this bench. And you could practice with the distance so that it feels safe and manageable to you, okay?
I'm gonna create a button that's like a tractor beam that I can bring them closer or further away, fast or slow, and then I can control it.
Yeah. And isn't it great now that you've found this sense of comfort that you're already building on it and coming up with other skills that will be useful for you to feel more comfortable in the future and not so alone.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you. And thank you. It'll be interesting to see what other ideas you come up with. So, and now you're back, and we would have you leave the bench and
Gonna
come
step
back.
into Eric now.
Yes. Yes.
So, Eric, as Jane, my observation was that there was a very palpably strong desire for Wendy, not just Wendy's ideas, Wendy's images, but for Wendy. And there were several times, can you be there with me? Can you come too? And Wendy, I thought very masterfully, repeatedly received and redirected, because she's not your mother. She's not, literally, right? So I'm curious, as Jane, what did that feel like to you? First of all, am I right that there was a tremendous need, a desire for Wendy? Did it feel as if that part of you, client, was acknowledged by Wendy? And did it feel okay for her to offer what she did without offering herself?
Well, you nailed it. That was exactly the dynamic in the treatment that I was trying to convey. And, like so many things with multiplicity, there are some really positive aspects of having that kind of strong alliance and feeling that connection and feeling like they can utilize that. But I think I was also trying to really capture that, it's like when you're running a relay race, you can have the fastest runner, but if that baton transfer isn't smooth, it's going to kind of break down. And I was trying to create something where Wendy could show how you can pass the baton without actually holding their hand and running with them.
Yeah. And one of the ego state therapy, early principles we learn on, the way we attune and utilize, the relationship we develop with states of self becomes a model for how they develop internal communication and how other states connect with other states of self. Even resource states that we bring in, like Shira or parental mom, or maybe it would be like Dan Brown's caregiver, an imagined ideal caregiver. But that's part of it is always, we want to emphasize that the client knows, instead of us, because they think they need us, we want to slowly teach them that you know me now. You know the words. You've developed an internal Wendy. You've developed, and there's never this many helicopters going by.
No, it's not just a helicopter. It's Jane. She's on her way.
Right, it's Shira. She's gonna zap.
Or Shira, right?
Yeah. So
you're transporting the bench, to your camper on the
we got
Mississippi.
this bench for whoever wants to sit at the river. You have to be pretty cohesive with the parts of self that sit
That's
on that
Right.
bench.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I hope also you learn the playing with the space and how you can, navigate safety. And that's one of the real helpful things about ego state therapy is we really prime the language for safety and managing distance and titrating, and you do it for a moment. And so it's all about keeping a sense of safe enough, right? It might not be fully safe, but safe enough,
Safe
right?
enough, good enough, safe enough, adequate enough. Yeah, that sense of not pursuing perfection, but adequacy and sufficiency in the moment, right?
And this work and what David and I are trying to capture with these role plays is we're trying to help our audience, get these real-time examples of the concepts we talk about. So, you say, hey, one of the things that I talk about in ego state therapy is regulating closeness and distance and finding the right balance. And then boom, you pop up this example in the role play of, hey, I was traveling and I came across the longest bench you've ever imagined. And it just went so far. And you could imagine these other parts sitting wherever you'd like. What would that look like? What would that feel like? That was so good.
Yeah. And it's the storytelling that we get good at with hypnosis, right? Incorporating little pieces that really resonate. And when you know your client, you know what will resonate. Maybe it's not a bench, maybe they're a book reader, and maybe we talk about, well, we need this part that's stuck in chapter 2 to connect and have what's in chapter 10. And chapter 10 doesn't know what happened in chapter 2. So of course the parts that exist in those chapters are going to have different perceptions and different thoughts and experiences. And I call it perspective share. How do we get those parts to share perspectives? Can they have a little window into what happened in a safe and manageable way? You might have to really titrate that. So many different applications. And, it's coming to my attention that as we talk about this, clients are going to, I like people to know there's so much more to just therapy than talking about your stress, right? People want to come in and talk about, but there's so much work to managing stress differently.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, nothing really changes. So, if you're looking for therapy, I'm not taking new clients. I'm just going to put that out there. But I do have, I created an Ego State Therapy North America website. And part of my, passion and legacy is because people who take this training feel these techniques are so powerful, and you have a shift and you feel the shift and the changes. And they often think like it's like the missing piece, because it's so much more of an orientation. And I want clients to know, your lay population viewers, that there is a directory for people who are trained now in ego state therapy in North America. I have a directory it's estna.info, and there's a directory there, and they're listed by state. So some of them have had just at least 20 hours of ego state training. So it's more than not knowing about this at all, right? So it's helpful for people looking for referrals or wanting to kind of do this kind of work.
And I would say, from my perspective, again, since not everyone listening are people seeking therapists,
Right,
that there's still a profoundly useful message here from my point of view. I'm going to use some of the words I've heard you use. One is knowing, one is perspective taking, one is experiencing, right? These are, in a sense, building blocks of our sense of who we are, what we know, what perspective we take, the experiences that we've had, and they can come together in ways that are not helpful, stress-inducing, or, as we've tried to model today, they can come together in ways, and I would use the word, in a re-scripted way.
Yes.
It's sort of borrowing from narrative therapy ideas, that we're taking these elements, reconstituting them, so that a person can come away with a sense that, oh, I can put this together differently. I can sleep through the night. I don't have to have Wendy hold my hand. I can bring Wendiness with me or Shira-ness with me. So there's a rescripting that you've been modeling that I think is universally powerful, whether or not a person is seeking therapeutic help.
Yeah, and I
I
think
want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think you guys have all touched on the other important pieces of attuning to others in a way without judgment. And, we would all get along so much better if we think, instead of like, what's wrong with that person's ideas? How did they come? Those ideas serve some sort of purpose for them. We might not understand it, because we haven't walked in their shoes. We haven't grown up with their beliefs. We haven't grown. So it's that in therapy, we know the importance of unconditional positive regard, and that non-judgment sense of safety that gives people, because if people don't feel safe, they're going to fight, flee, or freeze. Right. So we can all kind of just think about it. How can we start focusing on keeping ourselves, internally balanced, as well as looking at other folks instead of what's wrong with them. How did they come to believe that,
How did they come to be?
And also, I mean, we are the reflective instrument to give them back what's right with themselves. And sometimes they don't have that way of relating with themselves to experience that. And it's such an art of being able to give it back to them in a way that they can take in and want to take in.
Yeah.
Well, Wendy, thank you so much for joining us.
This is so fun.
This has been great.
To see you guys. It's great. So yeah, and if people want to know more about trainings, they can reach out to me on my website, or it's always in the process of needing updating. But I do have a new foundations ego state therapy course coming up in the fall. That one's in the afternoon for the West Coast. It's friendlier to the West Coast. In January, I start another one that's in the mornings for folks who are early birds. Okay.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to catching up with you again in our next episode. A quick reminder, while we are both doctors of psychology, this podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, does not offer diagnoses, or engage you in actual treatment. The conversations, the opinions of our guests, and any information that we share here are meant for your general knowledge, your learning, your inspiration, and your motivation to put some of our ideas into practice in your day-to-day life. Remember that everybody's body and everybody's personal health journey is different, so what works for one person may not be right for the next or for you. If you have questions about your health, any psychological or medical condition, or any changes that you're thinking about making to your lifestyle, your diet, your exercise routine, your medications, or some other aspect of your life, it's always best to talk with a qualified healthcare professional who knows your personal history. Never ignore or delay professional advice because of something you heard here with us. We want you to enjoy the show and to walk away with useful insights, but ultimately, you are responsible for your own health decisions. Please use your best judgment, stay curious, and always listen to your body. Take care, be well,